Nobody cared about the old man, until the dog acted. He fell to the ground alone in front of a motionless crowd. The dog rushed over, pulled something from his pocket, and saved his owner. That day, it was an animal who reminded the world what humanity means. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We'll continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll hear in your life. The morning sun filtered through the leaves in Central Park, creating dancing shadows on the packed dirt path. At 72 years old, Edward walked with measured steps, accompanied by Rex, an 8-year-old golden retriever whose golden fur shone under the soft light. It was a sacred routine they had maintained for 5 years, since the dog had come into his life after the passing of his wife, Helen. Edward had retired from his career as a literature professor and found peace in these morning walks. Rex seemed to understand the importance of these moments, always staying close, attentive to every movement of his owner. The amber eyes of the animal expressed a wisdom that impressed even other park regulars. That Tuesday morning, there were fewer people than usual. Only a few joggers passed by hurriedly, and 1 or 2 people were walking their pets. Edward smiled as he observed a young woman trying to convince her small poodle to walk faster, while the little dog insisted on sniffing every bush along the way. There's a unique synchronicity between a man and his dog when they age together, Edward thought, while watching Rex explore the familiar scents along their route. The animal had come into his life through Sarah, his daughter, who lived in New York City and worried about her father's loneliness in his Westchester home. Initially, Edward had resisted the idea. After 45 years of marriage, Helen's absence was a void he believed could not be filled by any company. But Rex had something special. From the first day, he demonstrated extraordinary sensitivity. When Edward sat in his reading chair, the dog positioned himself at his feet without ever disturbing him. When the man cooked, Rex remained in the kitchen, but always out of the way. It was as if he intuitively understood human needs, adapting effortlessly to the household routine. The neighbors in the residential area where they lived soon became accustomed to seeing them pass by. Mrs. Miller, the retiree who tended a small garden in front of her house, always waved from her window. Young Tyler, who worked from home as a programmer, sometimes paused his garage workout to greet the duo. It was comforting to know they were part of these people's daily lives. Rex had developed curious habits over the years. During walks, he occasionally stopped in front of certain people, as if he could perceive something that escaped human eyes. Edward attributed this to dogs' refined instinct, but secretly admired this ability. There was one occasion when Rex refused to continue walking until Edward noticed an elderly lady who had tripped a few meters behind them. The animal remained motionless until his owner went back to help the woman. These small demonstrations of sensitivity created a deep trust between them. Edward knew he could depend on Rex, and the dog seemed to understand the responsibility he carried. It was more than canine loyalty. It was a partnership built on mutual understanding and genuine affection. On that specific morning, as they rounded the artificial lake in the park, Edward felt a slight pressure in his chest. Nothing alarming, just a discomfort he attributed to the slightly faster pace they had adopted. Rex, as always, remained vigilant, alternating his attention between the surroundings and his human companion. Edward's heart condition had been known for several years. After a minor episode 2 years earlier, he had adopted a routine of medications and care recommended by his cardiologist. Dr. Thompson had been clear about the importance of maintaining moderate physical activities and always carrying emergency medication. Edward religiously followed the guidelines, but avoided sharing details with Sarah to avoid unnecessarily worrying her. Rex seemed to have developed a special perception about these issues. On days when Edward felt more tired, the dog automatically reduced the pace of their walks. When the man forgot to take some medication on schedule, Rex would position himself near the kitchen cabinet where the medications were kept, like a silent but effective reminder. This harmony made other dog owners in the park observe them with admiration. It was evident that Rex wasn't just a pet, but a true life companion. The connection between them transcended the traditional relationship between human and animal, approaching a partnership based on mutual care and deep understanding. When they completed the first lap around the lake, Edward decided to sit on one of the benches to rest for a few minutes. Rex immediately positioned himself next to the bench, attentive to his owner's movements and the surroundings. The dog had learned to interpret every gesture, every facial expression, every change in Edward's breathing rhythm. The park began to get busier as the morning progressed. Children arrived with their parents, other elderly people started their walks, and the distant sound of city traffic created a familiar urban soundtrack. Edward breathed deeply, feeling the cool breeze touch his face. It was moments like these that gave meaning to his days, small pleasures he had learned to value after losing Helen. Rex remained on alert, as if sensing something that had not yet manifested. His ears moved, capturing distant sounds, and occasionally he directed his gaze toward Edward with an intensity that bordered on concern. It was this perceptive ability that had completely conquered the elderly man's heart. When Edward stood up from the bench to resume walking, a strange sensation ran through his body. The pressure in his chest, which before was just a mild discomfort, suddenly intensified. His steps, usually firm and measured, became uncertain. Rex immediately noticed the change, positioning himself closer to his owner, as if he could offer physical support through his presence. The world around Edward began to seem distant, as if he were observing everything through a translucent veil. The voices of people in the park transformed into muffled murmurs, and the sunlight seemed to lose intensity. He tried to continue walking, but his legs didn't respond with their usual coordination. Rex began to show clear signs of agitation. The dog moved in small circles around Edward, emitting low sounds that weren't quite barks, but unequivocally expressed his concern. It was as if the animal was trying to communicate something urgent, something his canine language couldn't translate into human words. The dizziness intensified, and Edward felt he needed to lean on something. He looked for a nearby bench, but the distance he would normally cover in a few steps seemed to have multiplied. His hands began to tremble slightly, and breathing became more difficult. It was as if the air around him had lost density, requiring greater effort for each inhalation. At that moment, Rex made a decision that would surprise everyone who witnessed the scene. The dog strategically positioned himself beside Edward, offering his own body as support so the man wouldn't completely lose his balance. It was an instinctive, protective gesture, but it also demonstrated the deep understanding the animal had about the situation that was unfolding. The first passers-by who noticed the situation hesitated to approach. A tennis player passing by slowed her pace, observing from a distance. An elderly couple walking in the opposite direction stopped a few meters away, quietly commenting on whether they should intervene. It was that typical hesitation in large urban centers, where people want to help, but fear getting involved in situations they don't completely understand. Edward tried to signal that he was fine, waving with his right hand, but the gesture came out uncoordinated and only confirmed to observers that something was wrong. His vision began to show dark spots around the edges, and he instinctively knew he was losing consciousness. It was a familiar sensation, which he had experienced 2 years earlier during his first cardiac episode. Then the inevitable happened. Edward's body yielded to the sudden weakness, and he slowly collapsed onto the park grass. It wasn't an abrupt fall, but a gradual collapse, as if his strength simply drained all at once. Rex remained by his owner's side throughout the descent, as if trying to cushion the impact with his own presence. Edward's collapse instantly transformed the atmosphere in the park. People who had previously hesitated to approach now ran toward the scene. The tennis player was the first to arrive, followed by the elderly couple and a young man who had interrupted his morning run. Voices mixed in exclamations of concern and suggestions about what to do. Someone immediately grabbed their cell phone to call emergency services. Another person suggested that Edward be moved out of the sun. A third voice recommended not moving him until specialized help arrived. It was well-intentioned chaos that arises when several people want to help simultaneously, but none are sure about the best action to take. While the humans debated and organized first aid, Rex demonstrated a clarity of purpose that impressed everyone. The dog approached Edward's unconscious body and with surgical precision inserted his muzzle into the inner pocket of his owner's jacket. It was a calculated and determined movement, as if following a mental protocol he had perfectly memorized. From inside the pocket, Rex removed a brown leather wallet, worn from constant use. The object was familiar to the dog, who had observed Edward handle it countless times during their daily routines. But at that moment, the wallet assumed an importance that transcended its common use. It was as if Rex knew exactly what he was looking for and why that object was crucial in that situation. The scene completely disconcerted those present. One of the spectators, a young woman who had stopped to observe, commented aloud that the dog seemed to be robbing his unconscious owner. Others murmured expressions of disapproval, not understanding what was happening. It was an understandable reaction, considering that the situation completely departed from expected canine behavior. Rex, completely oblivious to the negative comments around him, carried the wallet with determination to where Tyler, the young programmer who was Edward's neighbor, stood. Tyler had arrived at the park a few minutes after the collapse, attracted by the unusual commotion. The dog placed the wallet at the young man's feet with a delicacy that contrasted with the urgency of his previous movements. Tyler, recognizing both Edward and Rex, immediately understood that there was something important in that gesture. He carefully picked up the wallet and opened it, looking for information that might be relevant to the emergency situation. Among credit cards, documents, and a few bills, he found a small folded paper that caught his attention. The note was written in Edward's careful handwriting and contained essential medical information. It explained his heart condition, listed the medications he took regularly, and most importantly, provided precise instructions about what to do in an emergency. The paper indicated that in situations like that, a specific pill should be administered under the patient's tongue before the arrival of specialized medical care. Tyler read the instructions aloud to the others present, and they immediately began to look for the medication mentioned in the note. Rex, as if perfectly understanding what was happening, directed himself to another pocket in Edward's jacket. There they found a small bottle of pills, exactly what was described in the emergency instructions. The medication was administered carefully, strictly following the guidelines in the note. Tyler had some knowledge of first aid, due to a course he had taken years earlier, and was able to perform the procedure properly. The others present maintained a respectful silence, observing while waiting for signs of improvement in Edward's condition. Gradually, color began to return to the elderly man's face. His breathing, which had become irregular and shallow, slowly began to normalize. It wasn't an instant recovery, but a gradual process that reassured everyone following the situation. Rex remained close to his owner the entire time, as if monitoring every sign of improvement. When the ambulance finally arrived, Edward had partially regained consciousness. The paramedics praised the speed and precision of the first aid provided, commenting that the medication administered had been fundamental in stabilizing his condition before specialized care. Tyler explained how they had found the instructions and highlighted the crucial role Rex had played throughout the process. 3 days after the incident in the park, Edward was still recovering at home under Rex's attentive care and the recommended medical supervision. The story had spread quickly through the neighborhood and local social media, transforming the golden retriever into a small canine celebrity. Mrs. Miller had told all her friends in the knitting group, and Tyler posted a heartfelt account on his social media that was shared hundreds of times. Sarah had traveled from New York City as soon as she heard what happened, staying at her father's house to ensure he strictly followed the medical recommendations. During her stay, she observed with even more attention the special relationship between her father and Rex. It was impressive how the dog seemed to constantly monitor Edward's condition, always positioning himself to be able to react quickly to any change. But not all the repercussions were positive. On the Thursday following the incident, the doorbell rang and Edward found at the door an employee from the county Animal Protection Department. The woman, in uniform and with a clipboard in hand, introduced herself as Jennifer Wilson and explained that they had received an anonymous complaint questioning Rex's living conditions. The complaint alleged that an older animal should not be under the responsibility of an equally elderly tutor with health problems. The document suggested that the episode in the park had been the result of negligence, arguing that Edward did not have the physical conditions to properly care for a dog. The situation was presented as an animal welfare issue, but Edward immediately perceived the deeper implications. Jennifer Wilson was an experienced professional, but she followed rigid protocols established by the department. She explained that she would need to assess the animal's living conditions, examine his general health, and verify if the home environment offered adequate safety. It was a standard procedure, but one that called into question not only Rex's ownership, but the entire life structure Edward had built after Helen's loss. During the initial assessment, Rex showed clear signs of anxiety. The dog, accustomed to domestic tranquility and the predictable routine of walks, reacted with restlessness to the presence of a stranger making notes about his life. Occasionally, he positioned himself between Jennifer and Edward, as if trying to protect his owner from a threat he couldn't fully comprehend. The official meticulously documented every aspect of the house: the quality of food offered to the dog, the condition of the feeding utensils, the place where Rex slept, the availability of fresh water, and the general cleanliness of the environment. All conditions were exemplary, but Jennifer explained that the assessment was not limited to material aspects. A more comprehensive medical report on Edward's health and a psychological analysis of his ability to responsibly care for the animal would be necessary. In the following days, Edward's house became a scene of constant visits. A veterinarian from the county department thoroughly examined Rex, finding that the animal was in excellent health for his age. A psychologist specializing in human-animal relationships spoke at length with Edward, assessing his lucidity, emotional stability, and understanding of the responsibilities of having a pet. The process created discomfort, not only for Edward, but for the entire neighborhood that had followed Rex's heroic story. Mrs. Miller organized an online petition in defense of the duo, collecting testimonials from everyone who knew the special relationship between them. Tyler created a WhatsApp group to mobilize support, and even people who didn't personally know Edward sympathized with the situation. During one of the assessments, surprising information emerged that completely changed the course of the investigations. The psychologist, Dr. Rebecca Lawrence, discovered in Rex's veterinary records something that even Edward didn't fully know. The dog had participated, years before being adopted, in a pilot therapy assistance project at a public hospital in Boston. The project had been developed through a partnership between the veterinary school of a renowned university and the public health system. Rex was among the animals selected for specific training in detecting medical emergency situations and responding appropriately to them. The program had been discontinued due to budget cuts, but the animals maintained the skills acquired during the training period. This revelation completely explained Rex's extraordinary behavior during the park incident. It hadn't been luck or common canine instinct, but the result of technical training that had remained latent in his memory. The dog had been literally programmed to recognize signs of cardiac emergency and knew exactly where to look for emergency medication. The discovery generated controversial reactions among the professionals involved in the assessment. Some argued that this proved Rex was an exceptional animal, perfectly capable of caring for Edward. Others, however, questioned whether it was ethical to keep a dog trained for therapeutic functions in a common domestic environment, suggesting he should be reintegrated into institutional programs. Dr. Lawrence requested access to the original pilot project files and discovered that Rex had been one of the animals with the best performance during training. His skills included not only detecting cardiac emergencies, but also recognizing signs of depression, anxiety, and social isolation in elderly patients. It was an ideal profile for assisted therapy, but also for domestic companionship. The repercussions of the discovery exceeded the limits of the individual case. The county health department showed interest in reactivating the therapeutic dog project, using Rex as an example of the program's effectiveness. Local journalists began to investigate why such a successful project had been discontinued, generating political pressure for its resumption. But this attention brought unexpected consequences to Edward and Rex's routine. Television crews appeared at their door requesting interviews. Representatives from animal protection organizations visited the property to assess the possibility of using Rex as an ambassador for educational campaigns. The dog, accustomed to tranquility, began to show signs of stress from the constant exposure. Sarah, who had extended her stay to follow the entire process, observed with concern how the situation was affecting both her father and Rex. The animal had lost his appetite and showed reluctance to go out for his usual walks. Edward, in turn, felt invaded in his privacy and questioned in his ability to care for the one who had become his main companion. The climax of the tension happened when Jennifer Wilson informed them that a public hearing would be necessary to decide Rex's future. The Animal Protection Department had received contradictory pressures. On one side, the local community defending the dog's permanence with Edward. On the other, entities arguing that an animal with such specific training should not be in a common domestic environment. The hearing was scheduled for the following week, and Edward knew he would have to publicly defend his right to keep Rex. It was a situation he never imagined facing, The dog who had saved his life now needed to be saved by him, but this time the battle would be fought in courtrooms and meeting rooms, not on the familiar paths of the park where everything had begun. Rex seemed to sense the gravity of the situation. In the days leading up to the hearing, the dog remained constantly close to his owner, as if fearing being separated from him at any moment. It was a bitter irony. The same protective behavior that had made Rex a hero was now being interpreted by some as evidence that the relationship was codependent and potentially harmful to both. The hearing room at the County Administrative Center was packed on the morning of the decision. Edward had never seen so much movement for his sake and felt simultaneously grateful and intimidated by the number of people who had mobilized to support him. Rex, by his side, remained outwardly calm, but Edward perceived the tension in the way the dog breathed and the rigidity of his posture. In the front row, Sarah firmly held her father's hand, transmitting the strength he needed to face that moment. Behind them, Tyler had brought a tablet with dozens of video testimonials from people who knew the duo. Mrs. Miller was accompanied by her entire group of friends, who whispered quiet prayers. It was as if a whole community had gathered to defend not just Rex, but the right to affection and companionship in the third age. On the other side of the room, representatives from animal protection entities presented their arguments with technical seriousness. They didn't question the love between Edward and Rex, but argued that the animal's welfare should be prioritized. A dog with such specific training, they claimed, could benefit many more people if reintegrated into institutional therapy assistance programs. Dr. Lawrence, the psychologist responsible for the assessment, was called to present her report. She had conducted extensive sessions with Edward and carefully observed the interaction between him and Rex for several weeks. Her testimony would be crucial for the final decision, and everyone in the room awaited her words with palpable anxiety. The professional began by explaining the technical aspects of Rex's training, confirming that the dog possessed exceptional skills developed through the pilot project. But then she surprised everyone by revealing a discovery she had made during her evaluations. Edward wasn't just Rex's common owner. He had been, without knowing it, responsible for maintaining and improving the animal's training over the years. The careful routine Edward had established, the constant attention to the dog's needs, and especially the creation of situations where Rex needed to make independent decisions, had functioned as an unintentional continuation of the original therapeutic program. The domestic environment, far from being limiting, had provided the animal with a practical and constant application of his skills. Dr. Lawrence presented studies proving that therapy animals perform better when they maintain stable emotional bonds with a family, as opposed to the institutional model where they are housed in kennels. Rex had found in Edward not just an owner, but a partner who unconsciously stimulated his special abilities through daily coexistence. The most emotional moment of the hearing came when Tyler was called to testify about the day of the incident in the park. He described in detail how Rex had acted with surgical precision, locating the wallet and medications exactly when needed. But it was his final observation that deeply touched everyone present. Rex didn't just save Mr. Edward's life that day, he saved our entire community's hope that true love can still move mountains. Jennifer Wilson, the Animal Protection Department official, recognized that the case was exceptional. She admitted that she had never encountered a situation where animal and human welfare were so positively interconnected. Rex's living conditions were exemplary, his health was perfect, and most importantly, the animal demonstrated genuine happiness in his routine with Edward. But it was Rex's own manifestation that defined the direction of the decision. During a break in the hearing, when some people approached to greet Edward, the dog demonstrated the behavior that had made him famous. An elderly lady who was watching the discussions began to feel ill due to the heat and crowding in the room. Rex immediately went to her, positioning himself protectively and emitting clear warning signals. The scene definitively proved that Rex's abilities weren't just memories of past training, but living and active capabilities that naturally manifested in his daily life. The animal wasn't losing his therapeutic skills by living in a domestic environment. He was applying them in an expanded way, benefiting not only Edward, but the entire community around him. The council responsible for the decision met in a private session for only 20 minutes. When they returned, the president announced that Rex would remain with Edward, but with a special condition that would transform the case into a model for similar situations. The duo would be accompanied by a community support network composed of neighbors, health professionals, and volunteers who committed to helping whenever necessary. More importantly, Rex would be officially recognized as a community therapy dog, a new category created specifically for animals that perform therapeutic functions in a domestic environment with expanded social impact. The pilot program would be reactivated, but this time incorporating the host family model that had proven so effective in Edward and Rex's case. The decision was received with warm applause from everyone present. Sarah hugged her father with tears in her eyes, while Rex, as if understanding that he had won an important battle, for the first time in weeks, showed signs of complete relaxation. The dog stretched out on the floor of the hearing room, drawing laughter from those present who interpreted the gesture as a sign of relief. In the months that followed, Edward and Rex's life resumed its peaceful routine, but now with an additional purpose. Once a week, they visited the senior center where Rex applied his therapeutic skills with other patients. The dog had become a bridge between the institutional world of medicine and the welcoming environment of family life. The story spread beyond the city limits, inspiring the creation of similar programs in other regions. Edward received invitations to give talks about the importance of the bond between humans and animals in the elderly years, always accompanied by Rex, who became a silent but eloquent ambassador for the cause. Central Park gained a commemorative plaque at the site where the incident occurred, not only honoring Rex's heroism, but celebrating the transformative power of genuine emotional bonds. Children from the area learned the story at school and frequently asked their parents to visit the park, hoping to meet the hero dog and his owner. Mrs. Miller created a support group for elderly people with companion animals, and Tyler developed an app that connects neighbors willing to help in emergency situations. The community that had mobilized to defend Rex discovered that it could remain united to support other similar cases. But for Edward, the greatest victory wasn't in the public recognition or the social changes his story had inspired. It was in the small everyday moments, Rex sleeping peacefully at his feet while he read a book, the morning walks resumed in the park, and especially in the certainty that he had found a true family even after losing Helen. Rex, in turn, seemed to understand that he had become something greater than a simple companion dog. During therapeutic visits, he demonstrated impressive professional dedication, but upon returning home he went back to being simply the faithful companion who watched television beside Edward and stole treats from the table when he thought no one was looking. The story of Edward and Rex proved that sometimes the most beautiful endings aren't those planned by conventional scripts, but those that emerge naturally from the meeting of hearts willing to protect each other mutually. They had saved each other in different ways. Rex had saved Edward's physical life, while Edward had saved Rex's soul by offering him a true family. And so on the following mornings, when the sun filtered again through the leaves in Central Park, two familiar figures resumed their measured steps along the known trails. But now, each step carried not just the sacred routine of a friendship, but also the responsibility and pride of having become living symbols that love, when true, always finds a way to overcome the most impossible adversities. The golden-haired dog and the gray-haired man had proven that age doesn't diminish the ability to form extraordinary bonds, and that sometimes the most unlikely heroes are those we find right beside us, patiently waiting for an opportunity to show how much they love us. The end. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Edward and Rex has deeply touched your hearts, just as it touched ours while telling it. This narrative reminds us that life's most precious bonds often arise in the most unexpected moments, and that true love between a human and their animal companion can overcome any obstacle. If you are moved by this journey of fidelity, courage, and hope, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Leave your like and share in the comments how this story made you reflect on the special bonds in your own lives. Every day, we bring unique narratives that explore the beauty and complexity of human relationships. Your participation is fundamental for us to continue bringing these moving stories to you. Until our next story, and remember, love always finds a way to win.